But Jason has this weird ability in all of his movies to kind of teleport in front of people. I mean, except for in the third Friday the 13th movie, where like magically he's able to kill and stalk all these people perfectly, and then like the last girl that's surviving can all of a sudden get the jump on him, knock him out, hit him with a log, like get away from him, damage him, trick him. Like she had superpowers. The most unbelievable thing about that Friday the 13th movie is her.
Defeated by delicious fruit pie.
Okay, I think I have to actually stop it before it turns into a copyright strike. I don't even know if that's like an official Halloween music. I got a ringtone that I found because I was, as I said, trying to find just some kind of stuff for Halloween sounds and Halloween music. So I just found that ringtone and it was pretty sweet. But hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Defeated by Delicious Fruit Pies. I am NEDDJ on DBDFP, as usual, Ned the Janitor, or Eric, if you know me. So this week, I just want to get through the mug of the week. It's related to what we're talking about because it's a horror genre, but this is the RPD mug. It's the mug that you would find in the Raccoon City Police Department that you could probably see in the background but not be able to interact with because it was all just, pre-made backgrounds. And then my RPD shirt, I got them at completely separate times. I was really excited when I got this mug because it's like metal. It's my only metal mug, and I love it. It's almost like a camping mug. And it doesn't taste like metal, though. It's like a steel mug. So it's actually it's good. It's like those steel water bottles, but for coffee. No, this is not going to be a poop video. Anyway, I wanted to talk this week about Halloween and Michael Myers and essentially like the psychology behind Michael Myers. So not to bury the lead, because, I think a lot of videos do that. Again, as an aside, not to bury the lead, but it really bothers me when I look at YouTube videos and I just click on the title, because even for my favorite people, it has some kind of title about a topic that I am very interested in hearing about, and I want to know the opinion of that person. I value the opinion of many people on YouTube. I love the community, and I love to learn whatever I can from a lot of you. So then I click on the video, and then it talks about like 8 things that are not what the title was about. And then maybe if you dig in towards the end, you're going to catch like the end where they actually talk about it. And that's why I like never click on those top 10 list videos. Now watch, in a year I'm going to do a top 10 video about something, but I'll make sure it's like actually those things. And whatever the thumbnail picture is, I promise you, that will be the first thing on the top whatever list, like, because that's another thing I can't stand. It's like the top 10 things that went wrong in movies, and it'll show like a movie that you really are interested in seeing what was wrong with that, and it'll be the absolute last or second to last thing on that list, and you're like, oh, am I gonna watch all these things I don't care about? So anyway, I want to talk about Halloween. The thumbnail shows Michael Myers. I'm talking about the psychology of Halloween right now. So, just trying to be consistent for you, just trying to do this for you. So let's dive right in. I'm going to talk about, first of all, specifically, why does Michael Myers capture the attention of more people and have like a longer, more steady audience than, say, like a Freddy Krueger or a Jason Voorhees? Arguably, all 3 of those are staple people, but the high school kid with the ghost mask that like they made fun of in Scary Movie, nobody watches those movies anymore. What's up? Like, nobody watches the real ones. I actually like Scary Movie better than I like Scream, even though apparently I watched the documentary and Scream grossed like a disgusting amount of money. It was like the highest grossing movie of the time. It was one of the highest grossing movies of the time, and it was definitely the highest grossing horror movie. It was like, they called it like a sleeper hit. It was a good movie, but again, not iconic in terms of like how terrifying it was. And I think for the horror genre, it barely hangs on to its trophy of being like the highest grossing horror movie, which obviously Halloween just crushed in 2018. But I want to talk about why that is. I want to talk about why Michael Myers is more inspirational for fear and terror than these other horror movie characters, because I think there really are substantial epigenetic reasons, psychological reasons, and philosophical reasons for that. So I actually have an argument or two. So let me get into that. I'm going to scroll down on the chat so I can capture any of your guys' comments if you have those while I'm going through. So I try to interrupt me, but like I have a big long list. So if I keep going, it's because I didn't see what you said. So let's talk about Michael Myers. number one thing that Michael Myers does more, and again, this is in the first couple of movies. In the later movies, this gets worse and worse, and he becomes more and more formulaic, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But Michael Myers uses suspense more than just gore. So Michael Myers is slowly stalking Laurie, and even in the other kills that he makes, like he messes with people. There's an impending doom that you know this guy is in the house when these other two teenagers are upstairs drinking and having sex, and it's like, but you know he's in the house. And it builds that suspense. And also John Carpenter, obviously coming from a musician's family, his father being a prominent musician, him writing most of the music for his movies. We were just talking about John Carpenter's Vampires in a group chat that I'm in. It's fun. That movie's really funny. And I saw a Montoya montage, which you have to watch. Just look up, not right now, but later, look up on YouTube, John Carpenter's Vampires Montoya montage. It's hilarious. But anyway, the music helped with the suspense. The character helped with suspense. There's no facial expression. There's dead eyes. He's just in a mask, and he's slowly, methodically moving up and around the house and then disappearing. So there are some jump scares in the beginning, but like they build you up to be like, all right, so like I don't know when this guy is actually coming. And I think that's a big part of what is effective about him. I want to contrast that really quickly to Jason Voorhees in the third, I believe it's a second or third Friday the 13th movie where he gets the crossbow. And it's my favorite scene in the movie, but it's for the complete opposite reason. He's just up there on the dock. He has the hockey mask on. He walks over. This woman's in the water. He just kind of looks over, leans his head like this, and then just pulls out the crossbow very blatantly and just shoots her in the head. I mean, it's really funny because she doesn't know that it's him. She thinks it's the other kid that was pulling pranks on her. But just that contrast of like, you don't know, but you're about to die, and he is actually a threat and you don't recognize it. That's a completely different mechanism. But while funny, is not terrifying the way that Michael Myers is terrifying, because Michael Myers is actually always the threat. And these kids are completely unaware, but then even when they do start to suspect something's wrong, he's still coming for them and they still get dead. So that's the first thing. The second thing about Michael Myers is that he is not a person with superpowers at first. Again, he's a person who can be hurt. He can be stabbed, he can be shot, and it stops him. So it's not like Jason versus like goes to New York and he's just like pulling people's heads off and like, you know, knocking whole heads off with like a single swipe. It's not like that. Michael Myers is stabbing people with a knife. And, you know, aside from that crazy scene where he picks the person up in the second movie by the scalpel in the back, that's over the top. But the rest of the things that he does, especially the first movie, are very normal person. Like, not normal, but like a human being. And when Laurie stabs him with the knife, he goes down for like a while. She stabs him with the knitting needle. He goes down for a while. And then he gets shot and he falls off the balcony and disappears, but he runs away. He's not this invincible tank. Like, you know, he's not Freddy where like Freddy's a ghost. You can't kill Freddy. And even in the one movie where she thinks she killed Freddy by like magically she discovered that like if she pulls him into the real world she can kill him, but then that doesn't work. It just, all that does is it eliminates, I think, the suspension of disbelief that you can destroy your fear, you can defeat your fear. And I think people look for that. And I'm going to get into that a little bit later too when I go into storytelling in general, but Mike Myers is the perfect mix of overpowering, like he picks a person up by the neck, and he's a big dude. I mean, and the guy, Bob, is not a small guy, but he picks him up and lifts him up the door, and then just kind of slowly just like thunks the knife into the door to hang him there. Now, that's not impossible to consider, but it's terrifying. If there was a person that strong that is coming after you, that's terrifying. So I think that's another reason why he stands out. Not totally crazy and unrealistic, except for the later movies, but he is really good at being this scary, skulking, powerful character. The next thing to consider is that Michael has a scene in the very beginning of the series where he's a child, and he's in a clown outfit, and you never get to see anything positive about him, but you do see him as a child that all of a sudden goes up and kills his sister. They don't explain it, but he has this like blank look on his face, and he is then incarcerated. So he's another, again, a real person who was put in jail. He was put in a mental hospital for his entire childhood up until his adult years. So again, this shows that a person is inside of that mask. The character himself has been robbed of his humanity, or it's like you always have that kind of thought process of like, well, maybe he is kind of human. Like there's the scene where like Loomis says his name, he goes, Michael, and he stops for a second. And then he keeps going, but there's a hesitation. And when Laurie is looking at him in the hospital scene in Halloween 2, he's coming for her. He's gonna kill her. But then he stops and he like does the head tilt again and he looks at her first. So there's this element of hidden humanity or suppressed humanity, but there's something human about him that is being suppressed or robbed of him. So there's almost this amount of empathy that's there. And oddly, Rob Zombie, I think, does a much better job of this in the Rob Zombie remake of Halloween 1. And I know that's sacrilegious. I get it. Like, you're watching this and you're a huge Halloween fan. I get lots of hate on that comment section. That's fine. Let me know. Tell me all about it. That's fine. But honestly, like, you empathize a lot more with Michael as a child in the first movie up until more than halfway through the movie. And actually, the halfway point of that movie is where it all goes to hell. And not in a good way. So, but Michael has this ability to give you a feeling of humanity versus, again, a Freddy. Freddy was a pedophile janitor who killed children and then had his body burned to death by the people of the town. I don't feel bad for him. I just don't. And, you know, in later movies, he's just worse and worse and worse. There's nothing about Freddy that you care about. Jason, I mean, they never really give you the Jason character. He's always, at the very end of the movie, of the first movie, it wasn't, spoiler alert, I don't know if you haven't seen that or not yet, it wasn't Jason. Jason's not the killer. But in the second movie, in the third movie, he is the killer. But again, there's no humanity. He's basically this feral creature that is like an animal that hunts people down for sport and for food, right? I mean, I guess, but he just kills people. He's just a machine that just kills people. Like, he is the curse. Freddy is a ghost who cursed the town with himself. But Michael is cursed. And even the last movie, The Curse of Mike Myers, they even kind of tried to flesh that out poorly, but they tried to flesh out that, like, he was the one cursed with the Sam Hain curse, the pagan curse. He's not the curse. He's afflicted by this as much as he is the person causing the affliction. I think that's unique to him. So the next thing is Michael's slow. Michael Myers is slow. Now, you could say, well, Jason's slow too, but Jason has this weird ability in all of his movies to kind of teleport in front of people. I mean, except for in the third Friday the 13th movie where, like, magically he's able to kill and stalk all these people perfectly, and then, like, the last girl that's surviving can all of a sudden get the jump on him, knock him out, hit him with a log, like, get away from him, damage him, trick him. Like, she had superpowers. The most unbelievable thing about that Friday the 13th movie is her, not him. He's kind of more the same as he was before. The only thing miraculous about him was the idea that he didn't die from the second movie. But she had more superpowers than he did, arguably. And Laurie does not. Laurie is very much a person who, in the second movie, is struggling to walk, has a fractured bone, has a lot of blood loss, is really a struggling person, going against a human type character that just is out for her. But he's really slow. And I think that plays into how terrifying he is. Not scary, terrifying. Like, the concept of Freddy Krueger in Nightmare on Elm Street is terrifying. The idea that somebody could be manipulating your dreams to the point where you don't even know why or if you're asleep, and then he could do whatever he wants to you in the dream state, but you would have no power and no clue as to how to get out, and even when you wake up, you still might be in a dream. That's terrifying in concept. The execution of those movies is obviously not terrifying at all. They're at best slapsticky and Evil Dead-esque. They're like Army of Darkness movies, but not as good. I would not put them in the same category as Sam Raimi. I'm so sorry, Sam, like you watch this. But the idea of Michael Myers is that he is slow and an impending doom. He's coming for you, and you're not going to be able to stop him. He's stalking you. He knows where you're going. He cut the phone lines. And that's what kind of gets me into the next couple of points about why he's an impressive and interesting character. Michael can be defeated, and you can escape from Michael. In the Friday the 13th movies, they say multiple times how far away town is. Like, town is a 10-mile walk away from the campsite, and the vehicle has been disabled. There's no power, and there's no phone line. So you're screwed. There's no way. And the guy knows the woods like the back of his hand, and he can borderline teleport. So there was never any chance in my mind that any of these people were going to survive. And when they do, they go kooky and they end up being killed later on, much like the nurse in the Halloween series. But that's another story. But with Michael, you could defeat him. So you can run away from him, you can get to safety, you can go to the police, you could drive away if he didn't slash the tires and puncture the gas tanks or cut the wires. There are ways to escape Michael Myers. He can be defeated. He can be arrested and put in a mental institution. He can be shot. He can be detonated and burned and then disappear for a long time. You can defeat him. You can't kill him, but you can defeat him. And that's like a really interesting point to make between those two things. So Freddy you can't defeat because you don't even know if you've defeated him. Jason, you're dead, and then you're dead, or you could be dead. And if you do survive, you're probably going to be insane, and you're still probably dead after that. But Michael, you can survive. And that's really interesting, and I think it's unique to him. However, he disappears. That's the other thing about Michael. He can't be confirmed dead. So in the first movie, it disappears. He falls off the ledge and then he walks away or whatever, presumably. He just goes to the back alleyway. You didn't kill him, but you defeated him. So there's the defeat of evil, but then you still know it's out there. And that's very realistic to our fears. On a very visceral level, that's understandable. You beat back the saber-toothed cat, but it's still around in the jungle. It's not like you eliminated the threat. You're still under threat. So while he's not confirmed dead, this plays out best in movies that show this, in general. So there are movies where they kind of they really show he's obviously blown to bits by a bunch of cops, and whatever. That's garbage. And then he kind of goes under the water, and it just shows his what happens with him. The best is in Halloween 1, where it just shows he disappeared, and it's just oh my God, he's still out there, but he was defeated. But then, the idea that Michael he's able to be realistic in this way, that he can be captured, he can be defeated. In the newest Halloween movie, they capture him in the basement and then they burn him alive, supposedly. But then he disappears again after the end credits. And that is spoilers, and I don't really care. I'm going to watch that a bunch of times. You need to watch that. And that particular point has no bearing on how good that movie is. So, whatever. So, Michael being, why is the Halloween series more intriguing even more than other slasher movies? Because there's different types of horror movies. There are different horror genres. There's the zombie movie. There's the clown and doll type horror movies. They're the paranormal activity horror movies. So there are different types of horror. The slasher series is the kind that even within that, Michael does really well. So Halloween does really well. And I think that this is where I get into the psychology of this, that Michael shows us why we should be afraid of strangers. He shows us why we should be afraid of the dark. He shows us why we should have respect for certain holidays like Halloween, and why we should be afraid of evil. And I think all of those concepts are very visceral. I hear a lot in my daily life. I'm not a podcaster. I'm not a YouTuber. I don't know if you noticed this. You noticed this. I have a normal job, and I have a career, and I have my own businesses. And so in my normal life, I hear people say things like, I don't believe in evil. And I'm not even sure what that means. So you don't believe in good? Because there is no good without evil. They're diametrically opposed, and evil literally is the opposite of good, and good definitionally is the opposite of evil. So, I just think you're speaking nonsense when you say that. But what I think that's really speaking to is this belief that evil and darkness is not out there. And if only we understood why somebody does what they do, then we could overcome it. So that people really aren't evil. There are no evil people. There are people who do terrible things, but there's always a reason for it. And movies like this, I think, remind us of why that's a stupid idea, right? Michael doesn't have a reason to kill his sister in the very beginning of the movie. He just goes and does it. Now, later they try to show it's a curse and blah, 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 and that's what's stupid about the series, okay? That's not good. That was poorly derived, and John Carpenter hated that. What I'm talking about is, if you've seen the movie 8mm, which I consider to be a real horror movie, and it's a Nicolas Cage movie, so it's one of my favorite, but I can't watch it. I've watched it once. It's burned into my memory. And the one line at the end of the movie that terrified me and struck me forever was when the guy says, like, I'm guess you want to know why I did what I did? And he's like, I wasn't abused. I wasn't tortured. I had a great childhood. I had good parents. I do this because I want to. Ugh, that's terrifying. Like, that's horrible. And that's what's scary about it, because he's basically letting Nicolas Cage know, I am evil. I'm not evil for a reason. I had no background that would show you why I'm evil. I am just evil. And that's terrifying. It's like in Seven, that's just terrifying. That, the guy like Kevin Spacey he's just exacting vengeance on the world, and he thinks that people are the plague. I mean, his motivations are his hatred of people. And I mean, his journal and things, like, if you get into the background information, that's a little bit more understandable and a bit more psychological. But Mike Myers is like just evil. And even if it's a curse, that curse is evil, right? And so he is evil now. And even if he's, again, afflicted and the afflictor and the affliction, he's still evil. That is evil. And that's very unique. But being scared of the dark, that's a visceral thing. Kids they're scared of the dark. Nobody taught them to be scared of the dark. They just become that way sometimes. And they cry when the lights are off and they can't sleep, because it's natural to be. It's something before us. It's that epigenetics that I'm going to talk about in a little bit. But being afraid of strangers, like not just walking around and just assuming that everybody's going to be okay, like that, you should be afraid of strangers, especially as a kid. Like that, it's not okay. The boogeyman does exist. Maybe in our minds, maybe it's a conglomerate of a bunch of other things, but Michael Myers embodies what that boogeyman really is. And I think that's a really interesting thing for us to watch, both as an entertainment piece, but also as like a piece that resonates with us on a very visceral level. Like, and that's what I think draws people to watch it over and over. I mean, I know that's, again, all these things are like my opinion. Some of it's my professional opinion, some of it's not. But in my opinion, I watch that movie every year, and sometimes other times during the year, because of those emotions that it evokes and those things that it reminds me of, and actually improves my appreciation for good, because I can recognize evil. So what else does Michael do? Why does Halloween work better? Michael shows us a compelling case for the existence of people who are there just to destroy. So like Gozer the Destructor in Ghostbusters, like, choose the method of your destruction. And then it's the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. No, it's Michael Myers. That's really what happened, is that Dan Aykroyd was, talking to Joe Rogan, and he just decided to start talking about crystal skulls, but all of a sudden he just mentioned something that was really Mike Myers in his head. So then Gozer went back in time, talked to John Carpenter, and created Michael Myers. Conspiracy theory. But that's, I think, a big part of it, is that he's just there to destroy. He's not there for anything else. There's, once he destroys everybody, even like in the really bad movies, like, so in Halloween Resurrection, after he finishes his job of killing everybody in his family, he goes back home. And there's people there, so he decides, I better start killing them too. Like, he's there to destroy. It doesn't matter. He doesn't care why you're there. You're dead. And I don't care if you're from Dangertainment. You're going to eat it just as badly. So the next thing that Michael does is Michael reinforces the need for not being alone, which is interesting. It's not an on the couch late at night kind of like with big windows next to you kind of movie. It's not the best idea to watch a movie in that environment. It's a great movie to watch on a date. It's a great date night movie, and again, probably why it was successful in the theaters in the beginning, and every year since, because it's out in theaters somewhere every year. But it shows you shouldn't be alone, and it also allows you to remember why you lean on police. Like, the movie itself leans on police cars, sirens, lights, and ambulances to demonstrate when it's safe in the movie. Like, nothing bad ever happens in any of those movies when you are in the presence of emergency people and emergency vehicles. So in the one Michael Myers movie, which is the Curse of Mike Myers? No, it's in Halloween 4 and 5. It shows the police department got ransacked by him, and he killed like a few cops. But there was like a couple that he took them by surprise, and it doesn't really show how it happened. So I'm going to eliminate that from this analysis, because what it does show is that anytime there's an active ambulance crew and an active police force present, that's when you're safe. It's almost like at the end of Night of the Living Dead, when in the 1990 version, when Barbara shows up and there's the good old boys and the bonfire and everything, and that's when it's safe, and a helicopter's up ahead, and nobody's dying in that moment. That it's the same thing in the Halloween series. They always show that society needs to lean on its emergency crew. You know, the security guard that's in the front that dies like immediately, like he's not the police, and he doesn't have all the different people around him. So that teamwork. And then the other thing that Michael does is, you know, just showing that society is valuable, like that you really don't want to do this alone, and you don't want to buck society and kind of like go off and trespass and be doing something that ostracizes you from society. There's almost a Scarlet Letter-esque sensation that you kind of get if you've read that and really gone in depth with it. Thank you, Mr. Brocious, in your AP English class. You really understand that, like, what the story is trying to tell you, or like Mr. Brown and in the woods, like those stories are trying to teach you about going outside of the community's boundaries and taboos, and how that puts you in harm's way of evil to come and get you. So I think Michael Myers taps into that, like that old European literature really well. And I think that's another piece of why it's actually really interesting. The other thing is Michael does not have a reason to kill. There's no bargaining, there's no negotiating, there's no compelling him to stop. So, you know, again, this is later ruined in the movies, but for the most part, if he's coming toward you, you know, you beg, you scream, you plead, you threaten, you yell, you throw stuff, and he's still coming after you. Only when you approach, attack, and defend yourself, and then run away, can you defeat this evil. So the terror comes for you, and you cannot be weak to the terror. You can't be good that is weak against evil. You can't be meek. It's not a beatitude. It's not blessed are the meek. It's you dead. Like you got dead, and you caught the dead by not fighting. You tried to plead, you tried to beg, you put yourself at the mercy of evil, and evil did exactly what evil does when you put yourself at its mercy. It destroys you. And that's that's an really old story. That's an older trope than all of us. It's hundreds of years old. And so it taps into something that I think we resonate with more than just a stupid slasher movie where a bunch of people are dying and in unique and creative ways. Like, you know, it's funny that somebody dies from a garage door coming up and splitting them in half, but honestly, like, what's the value of that death? There's no real moral value there. The real moral value is in telling you the story and letting you know that you would recognize that that's dangerous too, and then you see the consequences of it. So the next thing is Michael really is the boogeyman. I'm your boogeyman. I'm your boogeyman. He is your boogeyman, and that's good. That he shows you that there is a terror that flaps in the night that isn't Darkwing Duck. He doesn't have wings either. He's not anything like that. He's horrifying, though, to have coming after you and to know that. And for Michael Myers to be a boogeyman, and for Laurie to like literally ask that at the end, is that the boogeyman? And then Loomis says, like, as a matter of fact, it was. You know, I think everybody can just kind of agree with that. You know, it's like, yes, that's true. And that's the other thing that movie does. It gives you some dialogue. Like, what dialogue is there in Friday the 13th? Like, there's none in 2 and 3 even, and they're arguably the best movies. And like, I mean, I really liked 1, but there's no dialogue that's rich and that tells you something about fear. There's nothing that tells you about terror. It's just, do you know the camp story of Jason? Yeah, now we're all gonna die. Cool. You know, and Freddy, I guess, teaches you something about like your own being inside your own head and being afraid of that kind of stuff. But the dialogue is very, very short and very rich in the Halloween movies, and I think that sets it apart. So that's all the things for Halloween itself. So I want to talk about horror movies in general, and then what separates good horror movies from bad. So are you guys all with me on this so far? Is this all making sense? Because I check in. I just want to make sure that you guys are following me, and this is an interesting topic because typically I try to do more about books, comic books, video games, movies, television, and goof around and just kind of have more fun with it. Today I just wanted to be able to give more of a diagnostic and give more analysis on something that I'm passionate about, like in the genre of horror movies. I think it's seasonally appropriate at this point. Like I maybe wasn't when I was doing this in July, but just in case, I just wanted to make sure that everybody's with me on that. All right, well, nobody's saying no, but thank you. So, all right, so horror movies in general and what separates the good from the bad. It's not the budget. So Halloween was a lower budget movie from most of them, and it was the most impactful of the series, of all, even the Halloween series. So it's not about budget. Horror movies in general have lower budgets than other genres, and there's a lot of reasons for that, and most of it is the money that they make. Making sense, even though I don't like horror. Well, yeah, I mean, you don't have to like horror. I think I'm trying to build a case for why it's important to get into horror, but like I get what you're saying. But if you look at the budget, it's usually in comparison to what movie it's making, the money it's making in the box office. So John Carpenter was asked to do Halloween originally because they knew here's a shoestring budget guy who can probably turn this into something that's going to make us some more money. So they gave him a crap genre, which is horror in terms of making money, gave him $200,000, and they're like, hey, make us a movie. And then he made them millions of dollars. And they're like, whoa, this is great. Make us another one. And then he didn't. So, for him to be doing that kind of a budget and creating a great movie, not just a good movie, but a great movie that turned the tide a couple of different times. It resurrected the horror genre and the slasher genre. That really says something about the series. It's not about the budget. You can have really high budget horror movies that are just terrible. I mean, I remember watching like A Scanner Darkly and like, man, the Tooth Fairy movie with like, the nasty lady, and it was just so poorly done, but it had like great special effects. Sleepy Hollow, a very high budget horror movie, which is just so sleepy and not so much. Well, it is hollow too. Actually, it's a really aptly named movie, Sleepy and Hollow. I didn't love it. It was just kind of boring, and it wasn't really that scary, and it just didn't add to the story of the Headless Horseman. And that's really, I think, the problem there. So, Night of the Living Dead versus Return of the Living Dead and all their movie clones. So what I want to go over with this is there are good horror movies in a genre. There are bad movies in a genre. So a good movie in a genre is like A Night of the Living Dead, the original, and then the 1990 version. Whereas like Return of the Living Dead, obviously it's not a good movie. I mean, it's funny, but it's not a good horror movie. It's just goofy and it's gross and it does all these stupid things. So, in that way, that kind of movie is just like, that's ridiculous. It's not meant to be a serious horror movie. But Night of the Living Dead told a story that again hit you viscerally, tells you a story about ourselves, about society, about fear, about death, and about impending doom, and our ability to try to wall ourselves up from what's outside and not really facing it, and thus eventually it comes and gets us, and we can't avoid it, and then we become what we fear. So there's a lot of really cool stuff going on in that in terms of like rich dialogue, philosophical conundrums, and like social commentary. Even Diary of the Dead does a really good job with that. Romero was a genius, obviously. Then you get a bunch of these like clone movies or just like zombie movies just to be zombie movies. I mean, Dawn of the Dead, the 2004 version, is one of my favorite ones, but even that storyline wise, it does some great social commentary. It makes some powerful statements, but for the most part, it's a little campy and it kind of just isn't that serious. Friday the 13th movies were meant to be jokes. Like, even the people, like they goofed around on each other. It was ridiculous. The whole thing is ridiculous. But they did some good things, but you have like Freddy Krueger, which makes fun of himself and makes these horrible dad jokes while he's killing kids. That juxtaposition is funny, but ultimately it's not a really great, I wouldn't consider the Nightmare on Elm Street movies to be good movies, even though the intellectual property, the character of Freddy Krueger is excellent. Because the concept's great, but the execution has been horrible. Execution. That's a dad joke. The Friday the 13th movies, also, Jason is a great character. The movies got so bad from like 5 until 10. There were 10. I mean, and then there were a couple remakes there too. They were bad. So there really are good and bad horror movies. And what makes good movies, I think, is more the suspense and the terror versus jump scares and empty death scenes. So when you're watching Jason kill these people over and over brutally, or like in the later Michael Myers movies where they forced them to have more gore, or Drag Me to Hell where, again, Sam Raimi, love him, but it's all jump scares, really loud noise, really big scenes, jumping up at you, scary stuff, hallucinations, stuff that's not really happening. That scares people, but that's not a good horror movie. Horror is not about being scared. Horror is about being horrified, mortified, terrified, to feel impending doom. So arguably a well-done horror movie, if you want to say like a movie that is done well, written well, tells something that'll last for a long time, it has to have meaning that drops us back years and years before, gives us something visceral, and then makes us feel terrified. And that's where I want to get into epigenetics. So epigenetics, I want to just explain what that is real quick. Epigenetics is this idea that there is inherited memory and inherited adaptations genetically that are not taught, but they're not necessarily like a reflex. So for instance, like there were studies done on chickens where they showed them a shadow that was shaped like a hawk would make a shadow. And the chickens like flip out and do stupid chicken things, like, oh God, it's a hawk. And then they bred chickens for generations indoors with no exposure to any hawks or birds of prey or any prey at all. And then they showed generations later chickens a shadow of a hawk. Just that shape, not other shapes, but that shape made them go like flip out again. That's basically epigenetics. It's the idea that they understood the shadow meant danger, even if they've never seen a hawk before. They've never seen a hawk eat a chicken. They've never been preyed upon. Their buddy was never preyed upon. Bob's been around since I've been alive, and Bob the chicken just, walking around doofy, and he's never been eaten. So, but still, that shadow makes me terrified, but I'm not sure why. It just does. So I run. Primal fears impact us on a pre-verbal level. So we know when something's dangerous, kind of like when we know that something probably isn't good to eat by how it smells or how it looks. And a good horror movie taps into those deep fears, the deep-seated fear about the dark and about being stalked or being prey. Like, remember, we were not always the apex predators that we are today. The only reason we are is because technology. When there were saber-toothed cats and terror birds and who knows what else, oh my, like man, bear, pig, we were the prey. So there's something that taps into that fear. That's a good horror movie because it's something pre-verbal. It's not something you can just say like, oh, that scares me. I am scared when an owl bear attacks and I have to roll initiative. Like, it's not like that. It's something more like, I don't know what's going on right now, but I feel my heart racing and it's really bothering me. It's terrifying. So the other thing about good horror movies is that I think that it can deal with dreams. It can help us with dreams. It teaches us about heroism. It teaches us about moral values. And a good horror movie probably does more for storytelling than obviously like a comedy or a romantic comedy. Not to put those genres down, but I mean, come on. But let me talk about this a little bit. And I'm not going to get too in depth about it, but I want to just kind of read this little bit that I've been ruminating on it, been kind of thinking about it for a while. So horror movies can help us to see conclusions to stories of bad people being stopped. So like of a babysitter surviving a savage stalker, that's a story that we can understand and recognize. We can see the value of community from horror movies and feel the fear of shirking those social institutions and norms. So going out to an abandoned house and drinking and having premarital sex, smoking weed and getting baked out of your brain in the back of a van in a campsite. These things we understand that this is removing ourselves from the safety net of society by breaking the rules of that society, and so having to hide ourselves from society. There's a lot of value in these horror stories to almost scare people straight, to kind of like make you think twice, like maybe there is a reason that we have this society thing. So seeing a character out on their own in like the state of nature, as Hobbes would have put it, it allows us to agree more fully with the bargain that we find ourselves in our own social contract or our own society. So you don't think about the fact that you're in a society and that that's a bargain. There's give and take there. But, people really complain a lot about rules and laws and societies that they live in. Horror movies, I think, kind of give a little bit of insight into like, this is what it would be like without society. You could get stalked by somebody and nobody's coming for you. And so like I want to, there's a lot to say about this, and I can get more in depth about this. And one of the things that I'm going to ask, since, obviously you're already this far, and if you're watching this later on and you got to the end, thanks. I'm glad you were interested in this topic. So what I'm thinking is I could do more analysis of these types of things and kind of leave the live streams to be more about goofy stuff and more like lighter analysis and kind of cracking jokes at the world. But I could make it my Subscribe Star page more of videos that are in depth and get more analysis, maybe make it so I can do those live for members only, and then you guys can ask specific questions. Let me know. Let me know. Email me, defeatedbydeliciousfruitpies@gmail.com. Just shoot it in the comment section. I'm happy to hear that. But, just want to look at kind of following up about the virtues of institutions that horror movies typically reinforce. That kind of thing, even going in depth about specific movies, going in depth about series, genres, even books, whatever, video games. There's tons of stuff we could talk about like that. I enjoy this longer format. I just like having these kinds of discussions. But if you would like to be able to throw topics at me, give me some time to prepare, and we can set aside. It wouldn't be on a Sunday night; it would be a different time. I'd be more than happy to do that. And I'll make that on the Subscribe Star or whatever. We can do that just from I can do like a PayPal donation thing, and I can make a membership site because I can't do it yet. I can't monetize this until we reach our threshold for hours watched. I already have the subscribers, which we're on our way to 3,000. Which again, thank you everybody. But I really, I want to get something else going because I just like that kind of stuff. So let me know about that. That's really all that I had to talk about this week was just, Halloween, Michael Myers, thinking about horror. And hopefully it at least piques your interest to watch a YouTube video that does like a synopsis of that kind of movie. But until then, I hope you all have a great week and and continue to watch some of the older videos. Like go check out some of my other episodes. I'm always appreciative of everybody jumping on here. I'll be editing this later on and dropping that into a regular episode. So tell a friend, share these videos, push the like button. It's like the thumbs up that's in there. And subscribe to the channel if you're new and watching this, and go check out some other videos. And I hope you guys enjoy this. It's not for everybody, as I always say. But if it's for you, it's your kind of thing. I'm happy to provide it. So thank you. I really appreciate people watching and giving comments and just being a part of this community. I'd love for this to grow, and I'd love for you to be the founding members of it. So, all right, that's all I got this week. I hope you guys have a fantastic time this coming week, and I'll see you next Sunday.